It's kind of interesting, like on Sunday mornings, like all over the world, there are buildings that are filled with people who are singing songs about a man, Jesus. And it's kind of interesting when you think about it, like we lift our hands in the air and we look up and we say things to him. And really that's kind of a unique experience among people, right? I mean, I'm trying to think of like anyone else that we would sing songs about and have that kind of experience globally. Can't get my mind around that. It's just kind of a neat thing that when you think about all over the world today, people are singing songs to the same person that we just sang songs to. And it's our faith that unites us and gives us hope. And so that's just kind of a neat thing. So we've been talking about being rich. And if you've missed any of that, I encourage you to go back and check out church180.tv, catch up on the teaching series. And I think it's kind of been neat for myself and our family to process this idea that, I mean, we're rich, and we've been talking just about different examples about that. And, I've been reading a lot in this vein as I'm thinking about being rich. And a couple of things that I wanted to just share with you. Week one, that was what we learned. Like, the good news is we're rich, and the bad news is we're rich, right? And we've been talking about that. So just thinking about this, when gas prices go up, by the way, there was another explosion, I guess, a couple weeks ago on the gas line. Did you guys hear that? Right? I heard about it, but I didn't know. And then people were saying the gas prices are going up, and they started to. I actually went into QT, and they only had 87 unleaded. Did anybody else have that experience? Right? So normally when the gas prices go up, what do? Yeah, we panic, we whine a little bit, a little grumbling going on, but what do? We go ahead and we put the gas in our car and we drive, right? Gas prices go up, we inevitably whine. Remember it was almost $4 a gallon? Oh my gosh, I remember that too. So anyways, we whine a little bit, but we fill up our tanks and we drive. And then this week, Sherry and I were in the grocery store, we were shopping, and I saw like avocados, like they're going through the roof. How does that work, right? I understand that these are like there's no season on avocados, is my understanding, right? They're like always available, right? And but they're going through the roof, and the price of food and certain food items is going through the roof. You know what we did? Well, we whined a little bit, but then we bought our food, right? That's what happens. When the gas prices go up, we whine a little bit, and then we fill up. When the food prices go up, we whine a little bit, and then we pack up our buggy with food, and we go home and we eat. And we can do all this stuff because we're rich, right? So speaking of eating, I read something that's pretty crazy this week. In our country, now, first of all, let me just say this. If you have missed this, if you missed last week or last couple weeks, you would have missed this. We don't think it's bad to be rich. In fact, we think it's good to be rich. We think that this is a wonderful thing. In fact, we're going to read a verse in just a minute. It says, God made us rich, and one of the reasons he did is for our enjoyment. So we are not bashing wealth. We are not bashing rich people. We're happy to be rich people. It's a good thing to be rich. Can I get a witness? I like to be rich. I just want to be really good at it, and that's what we're talking about. So I'm reading this week, and I found that we eat in America, and I'm not bashing America either, by the way. Huge fan of America, all right? We eat. If you think that's funny, you just wait, right? I mean, we eat more meat per person in America than any other country in the world. We love our meat, right? So we eat more meat than any other country in the world. Now, let me just tell you this. The average person in the world, right, and it eats 92 pounds of meat a year. All right, now hold on. That includes countries who eat as little as 4 pounds of meat a year. There are poor countries, and there are also countries with religious restrictions who eat very, very little meat. And it includes us, all right? So that 92 pounds a year includes the smallest and the biggest. That's the average, right? 92 pounds of meat per year. Americans eat. Anybody want to venture a guess how much meat we eat? 1,000 pounds a year. Holy moly. No, that was an awesome guess, though. It seems so anticlimactic what I'm going to say now. I don't know, probably a lot of bacon. Americans eat 120 pounds of meat a year. 120 pounds of meat per person per year. Now, that's on an average. The country that eats the second greatest amount of meat per year is Kuwait. Now, when you think of Kuwait, what do you think of? oil. You think of rich Arabs, right? That's what as soon as I think of oil, I think of people in Kuwait, I think of people in really long white gowns, driving Mercedes, living in palatial estates, eating lots of meat. I think that now, right? They eat 119 pounds of meat per person per year, right? So on average, Americans eat 120 pounds of meat a year. Now, that's huge. Now, there are people who don't eat meat. We call them vegans. And I saw something really funny the other day I wanted to share with you. Somebody posted this. They said, I love how all these so-called vegans still drink water. That's a fish's house, you disgusting savages. That's funny, all right? I mean, I eat the fish, but I'll drink his house. Okay. So they did some research, and they, the question is, why do people eat meat? And Mark Rosengrant, this is what he does. He's an economist with the International Food Policy Research Institute. That sounds like fun, doesn't it? This is what he said. He said, all countries eat more meat when their incomes grow and they have the economic wherewithal to eat more meat. The pattern is so consistent, economists now treat it as almost like a law of human behavior. It's consistent across the board. Historically, it's been. When a country's income increases, so does meat consumption. The more income, the more meat we eat. Americans eat more meat than any country in the world. We're rich. It's true. One of the things we've said from day one was, if we make $33,000 a year, that makes us in the top 1% of income earners in the world. We're rich. So when we're done eating, what do we normally do? You eat your big meal, supper time, what do we normally do? It's supper time. Don't take a nap after supper, right? We're going to probably park it on the couch for a while and do what? Watch some TV, right? Now, SpongeBob, don't watch SpongeBob. That's my daughter just said that too. Oh my gosh. All right. So Nielsen Media Research did this. They found that the average American home now has more TVs than people in it. Now, my family ruins that because I have 8 people in my house. But a normal home, an average home, will have more TVs than people in it. So I wondered, where does America stack up in the world in terms of TV ownership? And this is what I found. The country with the most televisions in the world is also the country with the largest population. It's China. In China, there are 400 million televisions. The country with the second greatest number of televisions in the world is America, with 219 million televisions. The country with the third greatest is Japan with 86.5 million. And then India with 63, Russia with 60.5, Germany 51.4. The 10th place is Italy, down to 30.3. Did you see the disparity? China, 400 million televisions, United States, 219 million, Japan, 86.5. We have so much meat. We have so much TV. We're just rich. Nothing to watch. You got to get Netflix, man. There's some good stuff on there. So, look. I look at these numbers, and I read all this stuff, and I think, we really are rich. So why are we so anxious? Why do we live so stressed? Why are we so discontent? Why? Because we're so rich. Why do we hear things like, I'm bored? Anybody ever hear that? Yeah. Why? How does that happen? How do we live so unfulfilled? And as I'm thinking through this, I'm thinking it's not because we're not rich, because I think the case could be made that we are. Maybe the problem is that we just haven't figured out how to be good at it. And so we're going back to this idea that St. Paul, he wrote this letter to a young pastor named Timothy, and he's talking to the church, and this is the letter. We've been reading this every week, and so I just want to read it again, and let's look at what he said. He said, teach those who are rich in this world, it's us, right? We're definitely some of the richest people in the world. Don't be proud, and don't trust in their money. Now, we talked about that a couple weeks ago. People who trust in their money will inevitably end up disappointed because Paul said it's so unreliable. If you place your hope or your trust in your money, you're going to end up disappointed, all right? Then he said, their trust should be in God, who richly gives us all we need, read this with me please, for our enjoyment. It's okay to have money. It's okay to be rich. It's okay to enjoy it. But then Paul said, tell them to use their money to do good. And that's what we want to talk about today. Or we talked about that last week. I'm sorry. He said, this is what we're going to talk about today. They should be rich in good works and generous to those in need, always being ready to share with others. To the rich in this world, that would absolutely include us, Paul says, I want you to be rich in good works. Now, he says, by doing this, they'll be storing up their treasure as a good foundation for the future so that they may experience true life. So, what I want to talk about today is one of the ways that St. Paul teaches us to be rich is not only to enjoy and to use well for the benefit of ourselves, our family, and for others, the resources that God has given us, but also to do good things in this world, to do good works. So let me just throw up a graph quick. And if you were to rate yourself in good works, if you were to rate yourself in good, helpful works, actions that benefit others, where would you put yourself? Now, economically, in the world, we're rich. How would you rate yourselves in terms of works? Would you say, to be honest, I'm impoverished? When it comes to good works, I am a very poor person. Or would you say I'm middle class, right? Rating ourselves on our good works. I'm middle class. Or maybe you would say, hey, I'm rich. What I want to do today is I want to encourage all of us to take a moment. If you have your notes, you've got it in your notes, just circle where you think that you are, or if you don't have notes, you can kind of do it in your mind. Identify on this chart where you would say that you are in terms of good works. And by the end of our time together today, my hope is that you will be willing to take an action that will take a step towards rich. Because the Bible says if we're going to be rich, let's be good at being rich. And part of being good at being rich is doing good works. So, before we get into this, I have to clarify this. This is important because Christians believe this. We are not saved by our good deeds, but we are saved to do good deeds. In other words, God never looks at us. The Bible is filled with this counsel, this teaching. God never looks at us and says, hey, I see all the good things you're doing. I see the good works you're doing. I see how kind you are. I see all the people that you're helping. You know what? Boom. You're saved. You're my child. I completely forgive you because of all the good works you've done. Welcome into my kingdom. You're now one of my own. That never happens. But what does happen is that God forgives us and calls us his own when we believe in Jesus, but he saves us and then expects us to do good things in this world. This is how Paul said it in Ephesians chapter 2. He said, salvation is not a reward for the good things we've done. Again, you are not going to do good things and have God say, because you've done those good things, I now bring you into my family. It never happens. The only way we become God's children is through trusting in Jesus. Salvation is not a reward for the good things we've done, so none of us can boast about it. We are God's masterpiece. In other words, God, when he sees us expressing faith in Jesus, he saves us from our sin. He saves us from ourselves. He brings us into his family, and he begins to make us something new that we were not previously. Look what Paul says. God has created us anew in Christ so we can do the good things he planned for us long ago. This is God's desire. Everyone who's a Christian, let me just say this. If you have believed in Jesus, God's desire is that you would do good things. God's desire is that you would go out into this world and you would do good works. Honestly, that's why people have high expectations of Christians, because they understand, they have a basic understanding that if we say our God is loving, our God is kind, our God is gracious, our God is generous, then we should live in the same way. And to be honest with you, sometimes the church takes a really big hit because people talk about our God, but then they live like he doesn't live. So God says, listen, here's the scoop. You're not saved by your good works, but you're absolutely saved to do good works in this world. So what I want to do is I want to tell you 3 things about these good works that God has saved us to do and expects us to do as his people. The first thing is this. My good works should point to God and not me. Whenever I do something good as a Christian, it should point to God and not me. So Jesus was teaching his disciples in Matthew chapter 5 one time, and he had a group of them around him, and he was talking to them, and he said, look, you are You're like the light of the world. How many of you have ever come up past Charlotte on a dark night? You're coming up over that corner, up over that hill, and all of a sudden, like, Charlotte explodes. Isn't that a cool thing? You know what I'm talking about? It, like, explodes on the skyline. Jesus said, this is what you're like. In a dark world, in a world that's filled with angry, confused, frustrated, disappointed people, and some people who just are skeptical of Christianity, you're like Charlotte on a hill. You can't be missed. You say you're a Christian, you're that light on a hill. And then he says this. He says, no one hides a lamp and then puts it under a basket. Instead, a lamp is placed on a stand where it gives light to everyone in the house. In other words, no one ever turns on a light and then throws a dark blanket over it. So Jesus essentially is saying this. Don't say, I'm a Christian, and then not do anything. No one turns on a light and then covers it up. Jesus said, that's not what you were made to do. You were made to be a light on a hill so that no one can miss you. You're a Christian. You're a child of God. Jesus said this. He said, here's what I want you to do. Because you're that city on a hill, because you're so obvious to everybody, look at this. Let your, say it, good deeds shine out for all to see. And here's why. So that everyone will praise your heavenly Father. When I live as a Christian in this world, when I am kind, when I am generous, when I'm helpful, when I engage in acts of service that make other people's lives better, the hope is that when I walk away, they're not going to say, wow, that Paul, he's a heck of a guy, isn't he? They're going to say, wow, Jesus has made a difference in Paul's life. They're going to talk about God. This is kind of what it is. I love that Jesus talked about actions. It's our actions that make God famous. It's our actions that point people to God, not our words. If you put a Jesus bumper sticker on your car and then drive like hell, guess what? Like, people are not impressed with your bumper sticker. If you wear a Jesus t-shirt and then you're rude to the waitress, guess what? People aren't impressed with your Jesus t-shirt. They're judging your Jesus by your actions. If you let everyone know that you can't attend Sunday meetings because I go to church, and then you turn around and gossip about your coworkers, guess what? No one's impressed with the fact that you're going to church. The only thing they can see is you're a problem in the workplace. If you post Jesus stickers all over your Facebook wall and then spew angry political invectives, guess what? No one's saying, man, there's a man of God, there's a lady of God, right? They're saying there's another partisan in a world of angry people. Jesus said the truth is this: your deeds, your actions will point to God. Christians, please, if you line up behind Jesus and you say, I believe in Jesus, it is so important that our lives and our actions actually do point towards Jesus. This is why God saved us, so that we can do good things in this world. Now, a second point about good deeds is that they should help others in the way they need it, not in the way I want to give it. This is important. The gift of a nice cake is not a good deed to someone who's trying to lose weight. The gift of conversation is not a good deed to someone who's exhausted. Can I get a witness? Right? So over the last several years, our church has actually partnered with two different community organizations, Pilgrims Inn, Evanport Elementary. The leaders of both of those organizations have said repeatedly, one of the things that we love about Church 180 is that you come in and say, what do you need? And then you do that. They said, you would not believe all the people who come into our organizations and say, hey, here's what we can do, and here's what we're willing to do. Or even Pilgrims Inn said, we have people who come in and say, these are the kind of people we want to serve and help. We don't want to help these kind of parents or these kind of people. Pilgrims Inn and Evanport said the beautiful thing about the church, Church 180, is that when you walk in, you say, what do you need? And then you do that. Isn't that the way we're supposed to do good deeds in this world? So there's a great word about Jesus that Luke, his biographer, wrote. In Acts chapter 10, Luke wrote this: God anointed Jesus of Nazareth with the Holy Spirit and power. Then Jesus went around doing good and healing all who were oppressed by the devil, for God was with him. See, let me just tell you right now, Christians, this is one of the things we believe, and this has been our experience, that when we believe in Jesus, he anoints us or he fills us up with his Holy Spirit. He gives us power to do good things in this world. Jesus went around healing people and doing good because God was with him. That's the case with us. When we believe in Jesus, God moves inside of us and gives us power and ability to do things that people need. Notice, Jesus did not turn water into wine for the crippled man. He healed him and made him walk. Jesus did not drop off a casserole for the family of the demon-oppressed boy. If you read through the Gospels, you'll find that he released him from the demon. Jesus didn't talk with hungry people. He fed them. In other words, this is important, his deeds matched their needs. That's the way Jesus went around doing good work. So I would just say to all of us in the church, as we're in this world and we're living with the idea of doing good works, be mindful that our deeds are appropriate for the needs of those whom we're serving. A final word about good deeds. Good deeds should happen in and through the church. Now let me just say, good deeds are not limited to Christians or the church. I know people who are not Christians. I know people who do not believe in God, who are doing incredible work in the community, incredible work in the world, even though they do not believe in God. So, good deeds are not limited to the church, but let me tell you this. They are the hallmark of the church. In other words, when people think about Christians, when people think about the church, one of the first things they should think about is those people do good things in our community. Now, I will tell you this. There are times when people think about Christians where that's not the first thing that comes to mind. Sometimes when our culture thinks about Christians, they don't think about people who do nice things and are kind and are generous and are just pleasant to have around. Sometimes when our culture thinks about Christians, they think these are people who are kind of mean, kind of judgmental, kind of rough around the edges, kind of harsh. And I just think we could change that. I think as followers of Jesus, we can begin to do good deeds in this world so that others will begin to think differently about our God. Now, there's a word of instruction written to Christians in the book of Hebrews, and I just want to read it to you, right? The writer says, "Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works." So just stop here for a second. When's the last time you thought about how to motivate your friend or someone that you know to do a good work? Now, let me just say, this is helpful. So it's fun to watch people in the gym. People go to the gym, and people work out alone, and sometimes they do a good job. But I watch this, and I see oftentimes that the people that have the best workouts are the people that have someone with them saying something like this: "Come on, man, one more rep. One more, man, you've got this. Come on, come on, come on." It's amazing. Those are the people that more often than not get a really good workout in because they've got someone there motivating them. And I'm thinking to myself, wouldn't it be cool if we had like a good deeds buddy? We've got gym buddies. What if we had a good deeds buddy who walked with us and did life with us and came along and said, "One more, man, one more good deed. You could got one more in there. Come on, one more thing. A little bit more. Just give it a little bit more." Imagine how much more impactful the church would be if every one of us did a little bit more. Imagine, wouldn't it be amazing? If we had a good deed buddy, someone who motivated us to one more act of love or one more good work. See, the truth is a lot of us don't have that. And a lot of us are not that. And so, as we're sitting here thinking, you're like, yeah, you know, the good deed buddy, that's not a bad idea. Maybe I'd like to be one, or I could sure use one. Maybe you're processing that in your mind, and immediately the question comes to mind, but where do I find a good deed buddy? The guy who wrote this had a second sentence which followed this one. Let us think of ways to motivate one another to good deeds, to acts of love and good works. And then he said this, and let us not neglect our meeting together, as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. Hey, a great place to find a good deed, buddy, is right here. You might actually be sitting next to your good deed buddy. Why don't you just go ahead and look around and look who you're sitting next to. That might be your good deed buddy. Go ahead, take a peek. And let me just tell you this too. You may have just found your good deed buddy, but let me just tell you this. You might be a good deed buddy. You might be the person that's calling out someone else. Come on, one more good deed. One more, just a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. Imagine if each one of us did that. How much good could be done? So you find your good deed buddy. You're encouraging one another. You're motivating one another. We're doing this for one another. Do more, do more. We've got this, a little bit more. Where do we start? There's so much work that needs to be done in our community, in our world. Where do we start? Look what this is from St. Paul, Galatians chapter 6. He says, whenever we have the opportunity, we should do good to everyone. Read this with me, please. Especially to those in the family of faith. So where do we start? We start doing good to one another. Like, we're aware of one another. I think about you. You think about me. I think about the person sitting next to me. I think about the person in front of me or behind me. And I ask myself, how can I do good for him? How can I do good for her? And we start thinking about it here. And this is almost like a training camp. We get used to doing good in here, and guess what happens? All of a sudden, it becomes easier to do good outside of the church. So I was thinking the other day, I was thinking about you. Like all of you, and the good deeds that you do. And I began to write, and quite frankly, I was like overwhelmed. And what I want to do is I want to share some of what I came up with. I can't say all of the good deeds that are done in our church, but I wanted to just tell you some of the good deeds that are being done and the differences that are being made. Bill and Janice Kuzlik and Madison and the rest of their children, they started with a program feeding. They kind of adopted a block, and they would feed people who didn't have food out of their car. It started small. They were in a rotation at their church, and they were in this rotation, and they would occasionally go and they would feed some people, and then a couple months later they go and feed some people. And after a while, the program kind of died out, and everybody else kind of just quit. And Bill and Janice and Madison and the rest of their family were the only ones doing it. They took this on, and they embraced it so hard, they embraced it so big that they actually got to a point where they were feeding between 150 and 200 people a month out of their car. 1 weekend a month, they'd make up huge pasta dinners. They'd make up these huge pots of food, and they'd go to these neighborhoods, and they begin to make friends in these neighborhoods. People that are in a different economic level than them, but I've watched them interact, and it's amazing how much love and just goodwill is there. Bill and Janice aren't pastors. They're just people doing good deeds in the neighborhood. And they're feeding almost 200 people a month out of their car. That's a good deed. That's the love of Jesus. And just a couple of weeks ago, one of their friends came and worshiped with them in our community. Isn't that awesome? And then Aislinn Call. Every Monday night she teaches Zumba right here. They clear all this out. And I was here the other night. And I tried not to peek, but I did. And I saw all these people like doing these shakes in these little tight pants. What are those things called? The Zumba pants. And they saw me peek, and it was weird. But she charges $5 a class. And so everybody who comes pays $5. They get to burn some calories. And then you know what they do with that $5? They take the entire $5, all that money that's collected, and they save it up, and they use it to stock up the food pantry at Evanport Elementary so that kids who might otherwise not have nutritious meals on the weekend can now have nutritious meals on the weekend because Aislinn and those who are in this class are doing a good deed. And Chris and Shantae Kiefer, they've started something called Cool Table Ministries. It's a nonprofit ministry that actually meets on the week. They have a weekend ministry, weekend camp where the kids get together, and then school groups based around where they bring kids in. This is elementary-aged kids. They bring them together, and they teach them things like value. You're valuable. You have potential, and you have purpose in this world. Some of these kids are experiencing the love of safe people for the first time because of Chris and Shantae and the people who volunteer on their team doing good deeds. And then Stacy Jones, right? He coaches football at Evanport Elementary. And at Trunk or Treat that we had a couple of weeks ago, I was blown away by all of the little football players that were here. And their parents were like, yeah, we know Coach Stacy. And of course, some of you may not even think this, you may not get this, but I asked them this question: does he punch your kids in the throat? Okay, you get it. And they're like, oh yeah, it's Throat Punch Thursday. I'm like, oh God. Well, let me tell you something. Those kids love Coach Stacy. And he told me a story the other day when there was a parent on the sideline who didn't know him, and he was yelling at the kids, and he was actually in an encouraging way, like yelling at them, but they mistook it and thought that he was cussing at them, and they said something to one of the other parents. They said, he's cussing at those kids, and this parent who knows Stacy said, he doesn't cuss at those kids, he churches those kids. This dude is making a significant difference in these kids' lives. When he walks into that Evanport Elementary School, those kids are like, Coach Stacy! Some of them are even coming to our church. It's amazing. One man doing a good deed. Ryan Welty, high school student, took it on himself to pay for a single parent to attend Financial Peace University. Game changer for the single parent. Ryan, good deed. Fran Hinson started something called Godspeak. It's an opportunity for ladies to come together on a monthly basis to hear one another's stories, to pray for our community, to build friendships. It's amazing what's happening with Fran's ministry, Godspeak. Josh Langley started something called Positive Friday. I'm sporting his shirt today, right? Stay positive, right? It's this basically Positive Friday is where it's a group that comes together to encourage people to think positively and do good things in our community. In fact, we're going to be posting links to all these different groups on our Facebook page. Josh is getting ready to do a toy drive for a family in our church who's going through a pretty difficult time. So I encourage you to check that out. And there's more. Troy and Ruth Ann Mitchell, who've recently started coming to our church. They lead a medical and dental trip to Mile End, Jamaica. They're actually taking a trip in January. If you're interested in going that, we're going to post the information on our Facebook page. The point is this: all kinds of different people doing good deeds in our community. And you know what happens when all that takes place? People look at them and they experience the results of all of those good deeds, and they say there's got to be something more than just that person. Then they've got to recognize the God who's changed them so that they can do good deeds in our world. Now, one sentence that's proved tremendously helpful for me as I think about, where do I start? Where do I do good deeds? We start in the church. It's an easy place to start, but we don't stop there. And I would just say this to you. This sentence has been helpful for me, and it's this: do for one what you wish you could do for many. Do for one what you wish you could do for many. You wish you could feed lots of people, you just don't have the time, you don't have the resources. Feed one. You wish you could listen to lots of people and put an arm around lots of people, but you just don't have the time or the resources. Do it for one. You'd be amazed what would happen. Now watch this. The church, in its early days, its first early days, was doing this. They were caring for one another. People were doing good deeds, and they were helping one another, and they were mindful of people who had needs in their community. And Luke, the historian, said this. He said, God's great blessing was upon them. There were no needy people among them, because those who own land or houses would sell them and bring the money to the apostles to give to those in need. They cared for one another. And this is what the church is to be. We care for one another. No needy people among the church, because we're rich. God has blessed us by allowing us to be born in this part of the world. Because we're rich, we have a greater and a higher responsibility to do good, not just for those in this building, but for those in our community, for those in our world. Let me just give you a couple ideas. I would encourage you, if you don't know where to start, maybe to reach out to someone that you've noticed is missing lately. To reach out to someone who has been here and you haven't seen them a while. Listen, let me just tell you this. Asking me or another pastor here where they've been is nice, but it's not enough. Reach out. If you've seen someone that's not here and you're thinking about them, don't ask me. Reach out to them. You can ask me for their number. We'll help you there. But reach out to them. That's a good deed. Or you could join an existing group of people who's already doing good. You could volunteer at church. You could participate in Positive Friday. You could do some Zumba. You could volunteer with Cool Table. Or you could even start your own thing like John Ray did yesterday. John Ray, the dude on the bongo, the djembe, whatever that thing's called. You know what I mean? John saw a need for the homeless shelter here in Rock Hill, for the men's homeless shelter. You know what he did? He called a group of guys together to have breakfast and started talking about, what can we do? That's awesome. That's good deeds. Now here's what I want to do. You don't have to wait for someone else to do the good. You can do it yourself. You can invite someone to come along with you, and you will be surprised when all of us start doing something good in our community. We start doing something good for someone sitting next to us. What happens? Remember, we're not saved by our good works, but we're absolutely saved to do good works. We're rich in good works. And I just want to encourage us today. We're getting ready to close here in just a second. I want to give you a strong encouragement to be rich in good deeds. We're not just rich in terms of the resources we have, but be rich in the good things that you do. Where are you on that continuum? Are you in poverty? Are you middle class? Or are you rich? And I would just encourage you to bump it up a notch. So at the end of the day, people will look at the church, Christians, and say, those people are rich in good deeds. Now here's what I want to do. We're going to pray. I'm going to invite the team to come up. And we're going to sing a song. We sang it a little bit earlier, and it says, We Believe. It's the song, We Believe. And in there's a line that says, let our faith be more than anthems, greater than the songs we sing. And that's our prayer today, that the faith that we have would be more than just words on a bumper sticker, words on a t-shirt, but it would actually be expressed through good deeds. So here's what I want to do. Just for a moment, if you would just take a minute, and I would just like it for just kind of you and me, if we're like you and me together, if we were having coffee or something, we're just talking, would you have this conversation with me? Some of you might say, you know, as I think about this, I'm actually not happy with the current state of my good deeds. And I want to do better. I'm not happy with the way things look. I'm not being rich in good deeds. In fact, I'm probably impoverished. Some of you might say, I'm doing good, but I want to be more effective. And I'm going to go ask God to help me figure out how to be more effective with my good deeds. If you would want to get that ball started, and if I could partner with prayer, if you just put your hand up in the air and say, you know, when it comes to good deeds, I want to take it to the next level. I want to take it up a notch. If you just put your hand up, I'm going to pray for you. And the people around you, we could all just keep our eyes open so we could pray for one another, all right? All right, let's do this. Father, here's the prayer. In this world, there's a lot of talk. There's a lot of talk. We get on social media and we say all these things. We post these cute pictures and we talk about our intentions. But in this world, the thing that will separate us are the things that we do. I pray, God, that we will be people who follow Jesus, who do good deeds. I pray that we'll be rich in good works. I'm so blown away and so grateful for the men and women in this church that are doing good deeds. They're representing you well in this community. They're making a difference by the lives that they touch. I pray, God, that you would bless them. I pray that you would pour resources into them. I pray that you would pour big vision into them. God, I pray that our church would be filled with men and women, even more, who are doing good deeds and making you famous in our community and even beyond. Father, we praise you for Jesus, for the good deed that he did coming into this world, living a perfect life, and going to the cross and taking our sins on himself so that we could be forgiven by God when we believe in Jesus. And I pray today, Lord, that we as forgiven men and women would be passionate about doing good in our world, being rich in good deeds. This is our prayer. We believe, Jesus. May it be evidenced in our good works.
In this time of desperation,